On August 24th, Richfield's Inland Wetlands Board holds its fifth public hearing on application IWB 23-18, 27 Abbott Avenue, and sits September 14th for its sixth public hearing. This is for a 14-unit housing development on 0.47 acre and encroaches on the 100-foot upland review area of very sensitive wetlands.
Call to order the Thursday, August 24th meeting of Town of Ridgefield Inland Wetlands Board. I, Tim Bishop, Vice Chair, acting as Chair in Susan Baker's absence. I also see board members Alan Pilch, Carson Fincham, Dave Smith, Chris Phelps, Tracy Miller, and staff. We have Artie Pranjape and Caleb, as well as attorney Tom Beecher. Since we are called to order, we'll go to top 2 for public hearings. Item number 1, continuing IW 23-18 for 27 Abbott Avenue. Plenary ruling application for construction of apartment complex, associated parking and drainage infrastructure within the upland review area of the wetlands. 35 days to close a public hearing was July 13th, 2023. Extension granted until August 24th, which is today. We have owner LME Veton, applicant Brian Carey from Lantec. And I'll continue this public hearing. Have been my notes. If 23 days of extensions used, the public hearing could be continued until September 16th. Public hearing has to be closed on September 14th with all extensions, and 35 days to render a decision afterwards would be put us at October 19th. I'm going to open up the discussion to the applicant and try and limit it to 45 minutes. We have some other people, including the public and an intervener, who will speak after. So I'll turn it over to Brian Carey and the Lantec team to get it started. Can we add those?
I'm going to add Jason Klein. I don't see Brian Carey. Do you see Tom? Caleb?
I don't see Brian.
Good evening, everybody.
Hey, Jason. Thanks for joining.
Yep. Just wait for the rest of our team here to queue in.
Is Daniel Conant in your team?
Yes, he is. Daniel's
I'm going to promote him.
Great. And then we should have, suppose now's as good a time as any for introductions, that we make sure we get everyone on our checkerboard here that we need. As you mentioned, Mr. Bishop, my name is Jay Klein. I'm a partner at Carmody, Torrance, Sandak, and Hennessy. I am here tonight as part of the project team for 27 Abbott Avenue. Also joining us is our team of project professionals. We have Brian Carey, the Director of Environmental Services and a professional wetlands scientist with Lantec. He's labeled as Daniel Conant for some reason, but you can see Brian will put his hand up, and you all are familiar with Brian in any event, I believe. We are also joined by Andy Sumalides, our project engineer, professional engineer, and also joining us this evening, Anthony Zemba, a professional soil scientist and certified ecologist, who can speak to some of the issues that I think some neighbors have raised during the course of these hearings. It's been, I think, almost about a month, perhaps a little over a month, since we had really a substantive discussion on this project. Our professionals uploaded some responsive materials towards the end of July regarding this project. Our team is prepared to speak to those materials this evening. And we just recently, I think only a few hours ago, received some additional comments from Artel Engineering, the town's third-party consultant on this project. Mr. Carey and Mr. Sumalides are prepared to speak to those fresh comments tonight as well. So then after we respond to those, we'll be happy to turn to the petition that was filed, I believe, a little over a month ago. So with that said, I will turn things over to Brian and Andy Sumalides from Land Tech.
Good evening. Thank you, Jay. I was wondering if I'd be able to share my screen. I do have a quick PowerPoint that we did do last time, but it's just a quick refresher. And then we will go through our presentation. I understand you have a full agenda tonight, so I will try to be as brief as possible. We do also understand that there's quite a bit of public interest in this matter. We have received all the comments that have been uploaded into the record, the town record. As Attorney Klein said, we did just get some comments from Artel Engineering, as well as some additional public comment that has been slowly coming in. So we are still reviewing that, and we'll be ready to respond to that this evening.
Brian, can I just pause you for 1 second? Caleb, do you want to read any of those new documents into the record since they've been brought up?
Yes. All right, so the correspondence is at 67 in total. The biological evaluation peer review, final comments, extension letter dated 7/27/2023, site plan dated 7/28/2023, drainage report dated 7/28/2023, land tech comment response to Artel Engineering comments dated 7/24/2023, OM report dated 7/28/2023, response to public hearing comments dated 8/11/2023, biological evaluation peer review comment on petition to intervene, Steve Trinkus comments, Steve Danzer comments, position statement utilization of 100-foot buffer zones to protect riparian areas in Connecticut, engineer peer review comments dated 8/24/2023, 2004 Connecticut Stormwater Quality Manual, and Anthony Zemba resume.
Great, thank you. Sorry to
No
cut you
problem.
short, Brian. I just want to make sure we're referring to those that they're read into the record.
Again, I wanted to do a little housekeeping measure, because we did, it has been, as Jay said, a month since we last met on this application. Our outline for our presentation tonight, just so you know, is we're going to go through this PowerPoint. Andy Sumalides will address the updated site plans that were submitted in response to comments received by the third-party reviewers from the town of Ridgefield, Artel Engineering, and the Southwestern Conservation District. And then I will speak in regard to some of the outstanding issues related to adequacy of the wetland buffer, and if need be, Anthony Zemba can answer questions regarding some of the questions regarding the wildlife proximate to the site. And then Jay will finish. We do hope to have time to be able to rebut any comments issued by the public or interested parties prior to the end of the hearing tonight. That being said, as we all know, the site is 27 Abbott Avenue, located in the urban area of downtown Ridgefield. Just to go over this again quickly, the existing site is 0.44 acres, is improved with a single-family residential house that was constructed in 1951. The proposed project is to construct a 14 townhouse style condominium units on the property that will not be owner occupied. They will be held by a management company. The site is serviced with public utilities, including sanitary sewer and municipal water. This site, the project will not be utilizing a septic system, which will come up a little bit later, as there's been questions about that. I think this is a key point to bring up again and again. There are no wetlands or water courses located on the site. The regulated intermittent water course is located directly off the site to the east. So again, there are no wetlands or water regulated area or regulated water courses on the property. The proposed project includes the development and planting of a 20-foot wide buffer between our property and the offsite wetland. As part of our due diligence, we did file a request with the state of Connecticut Natural Diversity Database. There was no identified presence of state and threatened or endangered species based on that review from the state. The site is not located in the FEMA floodway, flood zone or floodway. The property does have an existing wetland permit that was issued previously for the construction of a 3-apartment building along the rear east part of the property. That approval does allow for the construction of the 3-apartment building within the 50-foot upland review area, and the site is located within the Titicus River watershed. As you can see, our site is to the west of the regulated area. If we zoom out a bit, you can see that the site is located.
Brian, I don't know if you're sharing.
Oh. Sorry. Can everyone see that now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. So, as discussed, our site is located to the west of the regulated area. Adjacent land use includes residential, commercial to the southeast, which is really downtown Ridgefield. The Ridgefield Housing Authority is located on the other side of the regulated area, built basically up to and adjacent to the existing wetland resource. There's a south of the site, there is a existing condominium complex that was constructed in 1999 and mostly residential to the west of the site. Soil mapping on the site basically shows that the wetlands are located just barely off-site to the east. This is the NRCS map. Other soils associated with the site are associated with urban complex, which is obvious based on the historic nature and development of the property and adjacent properties. These are photos of the wetland regulated area that were taken in June of 2023. You can see that at that time, this is a intermittent water course, not flowing at all points during the year, and adjacent wetlands associated with that water course. This is the property directly to the south. You can see heavily developed impervious area right to the edge of the existing stream course. Our site is beyond where this fence you can see in the left of the photo. So again, adjacent uses of the property of adjacent sites are heavily urbanized where stormwater, which is direct discharging into the water course. Here's another picture of offsite, directly south of our site. You can see stormwater is likely just discharging directly from that development into the identified stream course. Just to go through our proposal real quick again, alternatives. We did submit 4 different alternatives. Obviously, the no build alternative is it's self-explanatory. We did look at some other alternatives prior to coming up with the current design. Alternative 4, which we have found to be our desired alternative, has really been developed based on comments that we have received from the commission and third-party review comments, and the needs of the applicant to develop the property in a manner that's consistent with the wetland regulations. Just to go through those real quick, this is an approved alternative. This is not so we call this a separate alternative. This is an approved alternative to construct. This was approved in, I believe, 2018 by the town. There is an existing wetland permit to construct a three-apartment structure. There is no stormwater facilities associated with this. Most of the construction is occurring within the 50-foot buffer, and also within the 100-foot buffer of the property. This was our alternative that was previously submitted. We backed off of this based on comments received. This is just to show what can be constructed on the site outside of the 100-foot upland review area. This would be a 3-story apartment building, which would not require the benefit of a wetland approval, since all construction would occur outside of the upland review area, regulated area. Finally, this is the preferred alternative 4 that was submitted, submitted prior to the meeting a couple weeks ago. We basically flipped the building from along the north side of the property to the south side, changed the dimension and layout of the Coltech system so that we could further limit the amount of construction occurring within that 50-foot buffer, and basically the planting plan has been updated also to reflect the changes from this. So just going through that, I just wanted to provide again a brief update since our last meeting, just to kind of give us a baseline going forward. That being said, Andy Selmalides, who's professional engineer in our office, is also principal Land Tech, was going to go through and discuss the stormwater design changes and address some of the comments that we received as part of the public hearing record to date. And then I will jump back on and discuss no impacts to wetlands, functions and values as such.
Good evening. For the record, Andy Selmalides, professional engineer and principal at Land Tech out of Westport. I'm going to share my screen as well. So I will quickly go through Artel's comments from July 24th. We addressed those, revised those, and submitted them before the last hearing, but you guys we haven't had a chance to really discuss them. So I'll just run through those. One of the comments was a separating distance of the building to the detention system. The plan before this had the detention system, infiltration system, north-south. Now it's oriented east-west on the property. North is up on this page. We had in the original proposal 5 feet of separation. The 2023 draft water quality manual states 10 feet of separation from a detention system to a building. So that provided us an opportunity to rotate the Coltech system. I just want to point out this 201 elevation that wraps in through here, and then this 200 elevation that wraps through here. So this system, as oriented, actually in the east-west, stays in a relatively more flat area rather than what we like to call buck and grade as we were here. So most of the system now is right within that 6 inches of the existing grade. So that was the impetus behind rotating and relocating the infiltration system. One of the other comments was, what happens in a storm event, 100-year storm event, overtopping this catch basin? So what we did was, this pipe here, this outlet discharge pipe, these pipes were 6 inches. We upsized those to 8 inches to allow more water to flow out, still reducing all storm events up to the 50-year storm. But what that allowed is for no water now to bubble out of this catch basin. The elevation that the 100-year storm gets to now within this system is 204.09. Our great elevation is 204.5. So all the water up to the 100-year storm stays within this system, doesn't bubble out. It gets through this manhole, this pipe, and into a level spreader. The discharge for that, for the 100-year storm that comes out of that pipe, is 1.83 CFS. Also part of the manual, it states that 1 CFS, 4 linear feet of level spreaders required for 1 CFS. We have 1.83 CFS on the 100-year storm coming through this pipe. We provide 70 linear feet. We technically need 8 linear feet based on the manual. We're providing 70 linear feet of level spreader. The purpose of the level spreader is water that doesn't infiltrate through here. So the water quality volume fills up into this system. And I'll show you here in this cross section, it's probably better. Fills up into this system, and then it comes out a pipe and a manhole and out to that level spreader. So the water quality volume is held in here as required, infiltrated into the soils below, and larger storm events as they come through, slowly come through this pipe and out this level spreader. Beyond the level spreader is a vegetated buffer, 20 to 30 feet. The minimum distance is 20 feet. So that, again, that's providing proper dissipation, no erosion, and it meets the stormwater quality manual, the 2004 and the 2023 draft Connecticut Water Quality Manual. Another was the inspection ports. So we added inspection manhole and inspection ports onto the Coltech system. Those are pretty just standard. A construction sequence was requested, which we've added to our C-3.0 sheet. So on 3.0, you'll see here in the upper right corner, we added a construction sequence as requested as well. So we addressed the comments back in July 24, and then we got comments this morning, August of 24, some additional ones. We haven't had a chance to obviously write written responses to those, so I'll address those right now. One of those comments is the general notes on the landscaping plan need to be revised to reflect the current development. That's, you know, we have no issues with revising those notes. Comment number
Andy,
2.
can I pause you for a sec? Can you just state for the record what comments you're referring to?
Oh, sorry. It's the Artel comments that we received this morning.
Those
From August.
Artel Engineering Group dated August 24th, 2023.
Correct.
Thank you.
Comment number 2 was a description of the fill. There is fill going on this site. So the concern is what fill is going around the system. There is no fill below the system. The system will have crushed stone into the native soil. The fill around the site will be clean fill. If a spec is required, we're more than happy to provide a spec on the type of fill that would be placed. Obviously, it needs to be clean fill. There's paved areas above it, so it needs to be clean fill in order to compact properly in the site. Number 3 was a comment regarding test holes. So this also segues into the permeability testing. We did permeability testing using a double ring infiltrometer. You can see the testing here, I1, I3, and I2. Originally, the system was laid in this manner, north to south, as stated earlier. So we did testing across that whole system. The slowest infiltration rate we observed was a 1 inch in 15. Our design is based on a 1 inch in 20. There are comments regarding some more testing. We have testing all along this whole site, kind of almost central to the site. So we strongly feel this testing is adequate to design this system. This is a small site when we're talking about how it pertains to the Connecticut Water Quality Manual and their standards. This is a very small site. This is more than adequate testing for this type of system, but we're more than happy to provide some more testing prior to construction, as stated in comment number 3. Comment number 4, a large portion of driveway will also be constructed on imported fill. And now it comes up, can we look at options of pervious or porous asphalt or some type of permeable surface along this driveway? We are totally open to that. We are not saying, no porous asphalt. If that's what the commission wants or the board wants, we're more than happy to provide pervious asphalt as part of this application. We have no objection to that. It would certainly make this system smaller, having a big stone reservoir below this whole parking system or driveway system. We have no objection. If that's what the board wants, we're more than happy to provide, again, a porous asphalt design to that. And comment number 5 was in relation to the pipe bends. We don't have any 90-degree pipe bends. So I think one of the comments was, it was to connect to the catch basin so we can have one connection to this isolator row. So the comment is to connect all the roof leaders basically to this catch basin, and then from the catch basin to have one connection rather than these 2 connections. We're more than happy to provide that detail also in terms of the comments. And then the last was, not a wetland issue as stated, but the water line isn't shown on here. So obviously there'll be a water line that comes into the building from the street, nowhere near the wetlands. It will come off the street and come into the building. So those are the comments we received this morning. Again, very, very minor in nature, very easily addressed. I think the biggest one we'd love feedback on is if you guys are open to a permeable porous type asphalt design for the driveway, we're more than happy to provide that. I'm also going to go through comments. I think we got cut off at the last hearing in terms of being able to rebut some of the commission's or the board's comments. I think a lot of them were relayed in our TEL's latest 2 comments, but I'm just going to hit on a couple that seem to be still outstanding. One was the deep sumps and hooded outlets. Deep sumps and hooded outlets can be found in both water quality manuals. In the 2004 manual, it's section 11-S3-1. And in the new draft one, it's chapter 13, page 251. It talks about deep sumps providing sediment removal and a great pre-treatment, especially in this application where you have a small sub watershed basically going to each one of those. And that's this catch basin here and this catch basin here. They both have deep sumps and hooded outlets. And what that does is allows the sediment to filter out and grease and oils also to filter out prior to getting into the detention system. I think I touched on the 100-year outflow. I think that was one of your guys' concerns, the manhole, the catch basin bubbling out and potential direct discharge and scour in this area. Since the 100-year storm in the previous design did reach an elevation higher than 204.5. That's now has been remedied again by this 8-inch, a simple correction from a 6-inch to an 8-inch pipe to allow more water to get to the level spreader and not bubble out of these catch basins. Another one was the separation was brought up as well by the board. The separation, the 10-foot separation from the infiltration system to the building, we now have greater than 10 feet, and stated here a 10-foot minimum would be required. Look into 3 feet of unsaturated soils. We addressed those as well. Our test holes are evident that we are 3 feet above the groundwater elevation, our deep test holes. The inspection manholes was another comment that I think was addressed with the Artel report. And that was it for comments that I think addressed the previous hearing and the latest 2 comments from the town engineer. I do also want to point out just a couple other things. We did a couple other calculations. Within 50 feet of this wetland, there is an increase of 450 square feet of impervious area. That is the delta. You have an existing shed here that will be removed, and this small portion of driveway is the only portion within 50 feet of the wetland that's impervious. I think, we keep hearing the word 50 feet of separation from the wetland for a proper buffer, but we have 450 square feet of additional impervious that we're adding within 50 feet of the wetland. When you're looking at this wetland more globally, as this aerial loads that you saw earlier, here, this cyan line is the approximate limits of the wetlands. And here you see 2 dashed magenta lines. The closest is the 50 foot. The second one's the 100 foot. Within 50 feet, within the area between the wetland and the 50-foot buffer, you have about 80,000 square feet of area. So that's this area in here, not including the wetland. Within that area, there is currently 28,000 square feet of impervious area that is directly discharging with no stormwater treatment into this wetland. That is what's currently going on within this ecosystem of a wetland, and how much impervious area and what's discharging directly into that. You saw some photos of what's going on exactly next door. Here is the limit of that driveway in an aerial. Here's the wetland line. So that's what I just wanted to point out of, we're adding 450 square feet of that treated impervious area within that 50-foot buffer. I think that's just very telling of, what's going on here. I mean, I see a lot of from the neighbors consultant saying this system won't work, this system won't work. So your stormwater system will impact the wetlands. I could even say that if there was no stormwater proposed with our proposal, it wouldn't impact the wetlands based on the current functions of what's going on today. But our system does meet both the town of Ridgefield and the 2004 water quality manual and sections of the 2023 draft Connecticut water quality manual. So we see this as a huge improvement to the current conditions that are going on out there today. And I'll turn it over to Brian so he can dive a little bit more into the wetlands.
Thanks, Andy. So I just wanted to back up and hit some high points again, real quick. Again, there are no wetlands or water courses on site. The project has no direct wetland. There are no proposed direct impacts or disturbance to the wetland as part of the short-term construction process or long-term once the project is built. We have responded to all of the comments that have been submitted to us pretty much to date from the third-party consultants that have been hired by the town of Ridgefield. We did update as requested and have submitted into the record an invasive species management plan that, if approved, will be used after the property has been constructed. That being said, it is a fact that there are urban stormwater inputs that are being directed into the existing wetland and watercourse system. Much of the stormwater inputs that are being directed in the wetland do not currently provide any water quality volume treatment. The town's own MS4 stormwater system directly discharges into the wetland. So there are urban impacts that are being contributed to this wetland. But that being said, you know, a wetland and a watercourse is a wetland and a watercourse, and discussing the quality of a particular system is not necessarily a prudent thing based on the regulations, the Ridgefield wet regulations. All wetlands are wetlands, and all watercourses are watercourses, and they are regulated the same regardless of their degradation or quality. We agree that with some of the comments that have been submitted, that the wetland and watercourse area directly offsite do provide valuable benefits and functions. And those functions will not be impaired or impacted by this project. Again, there are no direct impacts to wetlands. The only potential impact would be stormwater, but our project has mitigated that through the BMPs we've provided, which is stormwater detention and treatment on site, and also the establishment of a riparian buffer adjacent to the existing wetland system. One of the things that keeps coming up, you know, not just at this hearing, but all hearings throughout the state of Connecticut, is what is the adequacy of a wetland buffer. Unfortunately, no buffer. One buffer on a project, it's very site specific. We feel that based on the urbanization of the area and the condition site, the existing site conditions, that the buffer that we have proposed is adequate in preventing associated non-point source pollution, nitrogen, phosphorus, and other types of suspended solids from mitigating from our project site into the adjacent wetland. It's going to be almost impossible to tell what inputs to the wetland are coming from one site when you have upgradient direct discharge wetlands without stormwater treatment or renovation. The one argument about the property is currently it's in a turf grass condition. The buffer that we are proposing is heavily planted with native upland and wetland plants that the Southwestern Conservation's own review had said were adequate and appropriate for the manner that they were being used. Again, not to keep harping on this, but adjacent properties have no buffer. So we're being held to a bit of a higher standard than what has been shown in the past. We do not agree with all the comments that have been put forward by some of the other consultants. We find them to be a little bit speculative. The exact width, again, going forward, the third-party consultant that the town had, again, found that the buffer width, while he didn't comment on that directly, he did say that the plants were adequate for their scope. Mr. Samolides did touch on the fact that there's only going to be an increase of 450 square feet within the 50-foot upland buffer. and there's been a lot of discussion about that. Buffer widths, as discussed, what will vary greatly for the need based on the specific projects. Again, we are making an improvement to the existing condition by improving the planting buffer. Tim, if I could just share my screen real quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Does he have permission, Artie?
He can share it as a panelist.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to go to the planting plan. So currently, this area is grass all the way up to the property line. We will be installing, like I said, a heavily planted buffer that will be monitored for future invasive vegetation to make sure that this area is maintained in a native habitat and that it doesn't become a snarled invasive mess, which happens many times. You know, if this project were to be approved, we would not have a problem with the condition that would require a long-term type of habitat management condition or agreement to make sure that that area does not revert into some invasive problem. There's been a lot of discussions about threatened and endangered species on the site. We really haven't found any evidence of that when we've been on the property. The existing condition of the property in a turf grass condition doesn't really support, the habitat doesn't really support any threatened or endangered species in that particular area. There's been talk about the blue spotted salamander. We can't confirm or deny the presence of that in the adjacent wetland, but I think it is clear that based on former state statutes and case law under Unistar and the Conservation and Inland Wetland Commission of the town of, I believe it was Simsbury, that only if there is a direct physical adverse impact on a species that will harm or degrade the wetland, that can be used as a manner for looking at wildlife impact. I'll let Jay Klein opine about that a little bit longer. But again, we have found no evidence of that. You know, some of the notes that have been brought to us again about the quality of the wetland. You know, we do agree that the wetland is serving several valuable functions, including flood retention and wildlife habitat. The project does not impugn or impact any of those existing functions. That being said, we think it's our professional opinion that the buffer is adequate. It's more protective than what has been previously approved and what is the standing approval for the site associated with the 3 apartment project that could be built today. Again, that's not the preferred alternative moving forward. So we think that we have mitigated any potential impacts to wetlands based on the updated site plans. That being said, I don't really have much more to add. I think that this it's pretty straightforward application as far as it's not having any impacts to the associated wetlands, either long-term or short-term. And I just want to close with that.
Mr. or acting chairman, I suppose, or vice chairman, however, whatever you want to go by this evening. As I mentioned at the beginning, we do have Anthony Zemba with us, and as Brian touched on, there were some comments concerning animal and wildlife. I think it would be helpful for Mr. Zemba to talk a little bit about his observations and involvement. And I can address concerns after him, or would also be happy to save my piece for after some of the public, the members of the public have had a chance to speak. I'm mindful of the clock that we're dealing with tonight. So, Anthony.
Thanks,
would you
Jason.
like to- Perfect.
Yeah, can we add Mr. Zimba to?
Is he under
the panel.
Daniel Conan? Because we see 3 of them.
Yes, for the record, that's the, I think we forwarded a Zoom invite and it looks like we had a couple folks log in under Dan's credentials. So the Daniel Conan that will be speaking in a moment is in fact Anthony Zemba, again, professional soil scientist and certified ecologist with Land Tech.
So
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, this is Anthony
Yes,
Zemba.
thanks, Anthony.
Yeah, just one clarification. I'm sorry, the certified ecologist certification actually expired last year. I've had that certification since 2011. Renewed it a couple times during that time period. And I've been remiss in not renewing that. It's currently in the works to have it renewed, but just wanted to make that clarification for the record.
And just to confirm, Anthony, you're with Land Tech as well.
Yeah, and I am an ecologist and soil scientist with Land Tech.
Thank you.
I think Brian Carey covered all the salient points regarding the functions and values of the wetland. One of which is for wildlife habitat. I wanted to reiterate how the proposed development will be an improvement over existing conditions. Because what you have right now under existing condition is a maintained lawn that goes right up to the edge of the property line. And that property line ends essentially right at the border of the wetland that I delineated. And therefore, the functions and values, the wildlife functions and values of that buffer are under existing conditions less than what we are proposing, which is to have a planted buffer with native species of high wildlife value in terms of providing cover for songbirds and small mammals, providing food for pollinators, for songbirds, providing shade for the watercourse, and structural complexity in the general habitat matrix. So that's the only point I wanted to make. All those improvements to as proposed in contrast to the current conditions, all those improvements would also benefit the blue spotted salamander should it be present in the system adjacent to our property. I think that's all I have to say about that, and unless there was any specific questions.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Klein, would you like to continue?
We're happy to continue, or if you're also happy to give some members of the public an opportunity to speak, and we can reserve the duration of our comments for rebuttal.
Okay, thank you. I'll first open it up to any questions or comments for discussion by members of the board. Anyone has anything? Alan?
That's perhaps Anthony, a question for you. One comment I do have is, would you please be able to address, it doesn't have to be tonight, the impact of the 5-foot-high wall around the perimeter of the entire property? I know you talk about impacts on the wildlife, but you're really creating a barrier here. Wildlife doesn't only just live in the wetland, but they also spend some time in upland areas as well. And that's a concern that I think needs to be addressed as well.
Sure, I can speak to that. So the wall would be a barrier to species with lower vigility. Vigility is a term used for the ease of movement. Certainly, some wildlife, specifically birds that can fly, the wall will have no impact. So what we're talking about are basically these low vigility species that crawl along the ground. In this case, the wall would prevent those species from coming out of the wetland and walking across parking lots and other areas that may be inhospitable to them. So we don't see that as a major significant impact to the species populations, as there's no critical destination from the wetlands offsite across our property to other habitats that they would need to complete their life cycles. So it's a non-significant impact, in my professional opinion, and beneficial to some species.
Just to add to that answer too, and again, that was Anthony Zemba for the record responding to that. Brian alluded to the Connecticut Supreme Court's decision in Unistar Properties versus the Simsbury Wetlands Commission, your colleagues up in Simsbury. And in that decision, the court case, or the Supreme Court rather, was clear in stating that impact on wildlife is relevant to a wetland analysis, or wetland board's analysis, only to the extent that an impact on the wildlife, on the animal, will have a direct impact on the functionability, the ecological functionability of the wetland itself. That's the only comment that I would add to Mr. Zemba's response.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Anyone, any other members of the board? Any questions? Oh, Tracy? No.
Well, as long as we're
Ben
going
Carson?
to, can you hear me?
Yep.
So just circling back then, I guess, to the Simsbury case, since you brought it up. A couple of questions for Mr. Zimba. So the Inland Wetland Board has authority to protect the wetlands and watercourses and the species that inhabit them. So isn't it true that some turtles need to migrate out of the wetland into the upland areas for nesting?
Yes, that's true. If again, Anthony Zumba responding to Tracy Miller, that's true. In cases where the species are using the upland to complete portions of their life histories, whether it be for nesting, which is typically done in sandy soils that are easily excavated by the turtle. In which case we don't have that. We have these fill materials along the edge there, which includes stone and other allochthonous material that was brought in along that edge. It is not a suitable turtle nesting habitat area. So this small little portion of this upland adjacent to this larger wetland system is not a significant upland habitat that's integral to sustaining populations of species of conservation concern within that wetland.
But wouldn't a wall deter a turtle from moving on beyond your property into other areas where it might want to nest?
Again, Anthony Zember responding to the question. If you look at the dispersal vector of an animal coming out of that wetland system, you'd have to ask yourself, along that dispersal vector, where is the animal trying to go to? In this case, coming out of that wetland across our property onto a residential lawn area and driveway, and eventually the residential development surrounding it, the roads, That's probably not a direction or dispersal vector that you want to encourage for the safety of that animal. So yes, that wall would probably be a barrier to that turtle. That when that turtle comes upon that wall, it'd be forced to go to the parallel to that wall as it's trying to walk around it. And that would lead it upstream or downstream where it would find more suitable habitat in the upland under existing conditions.
Okay, I just have two more questions. There's a large maple tree on the property which has roughly 80 or 90 foot diameter caliper, which is providing tremendous amount of shade to the wetland. And it seems to me that the implementation of the wall would ostensibly kill the tree. I wanted to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, again, I don't see that as a significant impact to the system. That maple tree that you refer to is a Norway maple, which is an invasive species in Connecticut.
It doesn't matter if it's invasive, it still provides shade. And I was asking about the shade.
Yeah, and so and the reason why it's considered an invasive species in Connecticut is because it impacts the ecology of the vegetation community in which it grows. In this case, it's out competing understory trees and other native high value plants that could potentially be growing in its place. That shade could be replaced with native plantings, and it would encourage the growth of underlying vegetation that's currently in that system that could be being impacted by the shade produced by the Norway maple.
I just want to clarify point two, because I think there's a little confusion. Are you referring to the tree on the western side, the street tree? Because there are no trees within the limits of disturbance as far as along the eastern portion of the property.
There's a large maple sort of right next to the wetlands, sort of behind the shed
Let me just share my
on
screen.
the eastern side.
Because that is off site and wouldn't be, so this is the property, here's the shed. That any tree is located off our property and wouldn't be subject to removal as part of this project.
My concern was the digging for the footing for the wall, damaging the root system of the tree.
Well, I mean, we can, I'm Brian Carey, for the record. I'm licensed, state of Connecticut licensed arborist. There are, we can absolutely put in requirements to make sure that the tree root zone is protected during the construction, whether that be root pruning or some other type of best management practice. That's not a problem. We'd have to investigate the health of that tree, but that tree should not be, it's not slated for removal as part of this project, and any precautions necessary to make sure that that tree remains vigorous after the project will be implemented.
Okay, and then just one last question for Mr. Zimba. Since the attorney has addressed the issue that the species, any wildlife species, need to offer a benefit to the wetlands for us to consider their habitation on the property as something that we should be concerned about. Have you done an assessment of whether or not there might be a wood frog on site or living in any of the trees in the area?
Anthony Zumba from Land Tech responding. So wood frogs don't live in trees; they live on the ground in forested areas. Yep. And they tend to stick to these forested areas and these heavily vegetated areas. the, again, the plantings that are proposed for this buffer zone would only increase potential habitat value for species such as that over
Do you
existing
see-
conditions.
Do you see this construction as posing a potential threat to any wood frogs in the area?
I do not.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And again, just to supplement Jay Klein, to supplement Mr. Zemba's comments, the Unistar decision, again, it's not the focus on upland review or focus on the species itself, although we are obviously with our team very mindful of our wildlife surroundings, but it's the impact on the physical or biological characteristics of the wetlands, the offsite wetland in this instance themselves. So is there an impact on the functionability of the wetland? As both Brian and Anthony, I think, have answered, the answer here is no, there will not be such an impact.
Oh, right, but with regard to species, that's why I asked about the wood frog, because they do lay eggs in the wetlands, which benefit the wetlands. So if there are wood frogs on site and they're removed, then that would cause harm to the wetland.
I think the importance in that is if there are, and I believe Mr. Zembo, we did not identify any on our property.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Carson?
Thank you, Carson Fincham, for the record. Tracy stole most of my question, at least most of the first one. But I just did want to follow up on that. So I appreciate the statement by the applicant's team that they will endeavor to protect the mature trees. When we were doing the site walk, which was not the same season that the aerial was taken, as you could see, the leaf cover was full. There was a substantial shade, and drip line from the trees that are off property that extended from the wetlands into the grassy area substantially. I don't know whether it was 40 feet, 50 feet, 60 feet. So I would suggest or request, I guess, that we have some sort of delineation of those canopy limits on the actual plan, so we can see how that lines up with, for example, where the retaining wall is slated to be put in, and whether that is underneath the canopy or whether it's outside of it, so that we can figure out whether there are different remediation strategies that would work to save that tree or those trees. I think there were a couple. There was one larger one, there was a couple smaller ones. So that's my only comment there. One other request, and forgive me if this is somewhere in the record that I haven't seen. I'm curious about the watershed that was used to do the analysis for the drainage system. For instance, there have been some comments, I think, from the applicant team that it's a pretty small watershed, and it very well may be. But I also recall hearing some comments from the public. I believe it was neighbors who said that there was water from off property that came down the road and came down the driveway of the existing property as it is. So whether you're proposing curbing or something to redirect that water, or whether you don't believe that's an issue, just wanted to investigate that to make sure that the watershed does not extend beyond the property, or if it does, that it's been properly delineated.
Sure, this is Andy Similiti from Land Tech. Are you referring to water coming off our site onto Abbott Avenue?
The reverse, Abbott Avenue onto your site.
Gotcha. So yes, we would mitigate that. Let me pull up the plan. So you could see here, the way this grading works is it would create a slight pitch up from the road and then go down. This will allow this to act as a gutter flow like it should along the edge of Abbott Ave. So all runoff would stay in the road. We obviously don't want to take everybody's runoff that's coming out. There are several homes that discharge right onto Abbott Ave, and it is a sharp corner, and then there's some of it's curb, some of it's not, and there is potential for it to run off. So essentially, this would create a gutter flow and keep the runoff on Abbott Ave.
Okay, I appreciate that. And do you know, so again, the comment that I had heard from a neighbor was that the water currently does go down onto this property, and I don't know whether that's accurate or not, but if you do redirect it and it does currently go into the property, is there a catch basin further down Abbott Ave, or do you know what impact that would have on Abbott Avenue further down the road?
There are catch basins further down on Abbott Ave, so it would just stay in the town's drainage system. These homes probably were built way before drainage requirements potentially were in place, because there are a lot of roof leaders that directly discharge onto driveways, a lot of driveways that directly discharge right into the road. And that's really, I think you've seen some of this MS4 talk of disconnecting impervious surfaces to the town's drainage system. So that's exactly what we're doing with our proposal. We're keeping all of our runoff, capturing it and putting it into an infiltration system. I think the goal here is, as everybody redevelops these properties or they do improvements to them, the MS4 stipulation is that they need to then reduce the impervious surfaces that are directly connecting to the town's infrastructure. So that's the mandate really from the state of MS4 of how do you reduce directly connected impervious surfaces. And that's what we've done here with our proposal. And I think everybody needs to be mindful of doing that with their future developments as well.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think this will probably be the last related question, but with respect to MS4, since you brought it up, so your system as proposed will empty into the water course. It's been called an intermittent stream. Every time I've been out there, it's had flow, so I'm not sure exactly how intermittent it is, but it is, it's certainly shallow flow.
Right.
Downstream, not too far, but at the end of the wetlands, there were, and I believe there was a letter from the entire Board of Selectmen in Ridgefield, and there have been a lot of comments from the neighbors with respect to the fact that there have been previous flooding events at the end of the road, where there is some sort of structure that I'm assuming is a municipal drainage structure that is assuming has something to do with MS4. So the fact that you're discharging into a stream that then goes back in to the town drainage system, do you know how that shakes out with respect to the MS4 requirements?
Sure. So if our improvements all discharge directly into that stream with no stormwater improvements, like I stated earlier, a lot of the improvements around the wetlands do, that is a directly connected impervious surface to a town's drainage system. So a water course, as well as catch basins in the road, those are all, as you stated correctly, those are infrastructure that you need to disconnect impervious surfaces. By capturing the roof runoff, capturing all the driveway runoff, we're capturing 100% of our impervious surfaces and putting it into a detention system. So we are reducing the MS4 from our current standards. Because currently there's driveway that runs across lawn. There's some thought that if it runs over X amount of lawn, then it could count as disconnected as well, depending on the municipality you speak with. But we are capturing 100% of all of our impervious surfaces and putting it into the detention system. That means we have 0% increase of connected impervious surfaces to the town's infrastructure. So it's a huge improvement from that perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other board members? Tracy, is that your hand up?
One more question about that. So now I'm not an engineer, so hopefully you can explain this for me, but looking on your last drainage report, it looked like, and I may have misread this, so correct me if I'm wrong, for a 50-year storm, the existing system has 0.42 cubic feet per second that flow off site, and the proposed has 1.94 cubic feet per second that flow off site. Is that right? Or am I misreading that?
Hi, Andy Sumalides again with Land Tech. Under the 50-year existing is 1.94.
I read 0.42.
Under
So,
existing,
yes.
where are you seeing that? Can you direct me to what page or where?
Well, let's see. I just had to look it up on my phone.
I'm just looking at the summary chart, but I'll go to the actual computations.
So. Okay, I am. Well, there's, page 22.
Page 22.
So I'm just looking at the number in the hydrograph.
Page 22 of the report, not of the PDF. Okay, hold on.
So I guess what my question is does the proposed mean that there's more water flowing off-site during a 50-year storm than the existing, than their current? Does
No.
your proposal have more water flowing off than the existing property has flowing off-site?
No, we're reducing all storm events up to the 50-year storm event.
So that outflow pipe that you showed, so what's coming out of that pipe during a 50-year storm?
During a 50-year, if you go to the next page, 23, and you look at the bottom, I'll share my screen. Maybe it's easier. So this is the 50-year storm. This is the detention system. This culvert is the outlet, is 1.33 CFS.
And then, and what's happening for the existing site?
For the existing, it is. It is. Hold on. Existing, we have 1.94.
So
Existing's 1.94, proposed 1.33.
So, but isn't all that flowing through? So there's a house and a driveway sort of by the road. And then doesn't all that runoff flow through the lawn?
So going back to the plan, all these roofs, all this driveway,
No, I'm talking about existing.
existing, what happened in the existing conditions, this all sheet flows over lawn area into the wetlands.
So doesn't most of that get absorbed by the lawn?
Yeah, the lawn's in the equation. So the CN number, which is called the curve number, the lawn area goes into calculating that number. So when you go back to the drainage report and you look at the curve number, which is the value of, in layman's terms, impervious versus pervious, think of 100% is, well, they call it 98% is asphalt. And grass, like, depending on the soil conditions, is 60, call it, just using round numbers.
So what is it that I'm seeing on page 22 that says 0.42 cubic feet per second?
Page 22.
Yes, what is that? At the top of your.
Where is that?
At the top of the blue line.
So there's two subcatchment areas. So let me go back to the.
Well, I'll leave that.
There's two watersheds.
I'll leave that
Yeah.
question for the peer reviewer to
Okay.
explain. Okay, thank you.
But I think he reviewed it, and I think he's in concurrent that. I think
Okay.
that's one of the. most elementary things to look at, honestly, is, making
Right.
sure you're reducing the storm events
Right,
and
okay.
making sure it's
okay,
modeled correctly. So
Okay, all right.
yeah,
All right,
we're
thank-
reducing all the storm events.
Okay,
All set, Tracy?
thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Alan, your hands up?
Yes. One more question. I'll speak. I am a licensed civil engineer. One of the questions I have concerns about is that with the wall on the north side of this, on the property line, and on the east side of the chambers and the building, and the building on the south side of the property, we're almost, the term I would use is creating, the term I've used before is a bathtub. And one of the concerns that I have is that you can go ahead and do a percolation test and, a deep test pit and come up with numbers. But when you create almost like I'll use the term, almost like a point discharge, you're directing all the runoff into these chambers, and they're surrounded by an impervious wall on its north side and east side. This is a wall with an impermeable layer that's being constructed on the detail. That's what it shows. My concern is that 3 foot of separation that you're showing between the bottom of the chambers and the groundwater will dissipate very quickly when mounding starts to occur, because in essence, you've created a bathtub. And it is something that I think needs to be addressed in this analysis. And I'm very concerned about that as well. That what's going to happen here is that there will be, when you do a test right now, there's nothing that constrains the flow. But once you concentrate all the flow in all these chambers, then surround it with walls, I think there will be an impact. And this is something I do think that needs to be addressed in the report, and not just, just don't give me, we did a double ring infiltrometer test and we did a deep test hole. I'd like to see something that goes beyond that.
Sure. The manual doesn't call for it.
I'm not interested in what the manual says in that regard.
Okay.
I recognize that, but the manual doesn't contemplate necessarily constructing a bathtub and putting, in essence, a point source of stormwater there.
Oh, no, it does. It talks about separation distances. It talks about impermeable liners. It talks about, that was one of the concerns with the 10-foot separation from the building.
I understand that very well, the 10-foot
Right.
separation, but when you have an impermeable wall to the north of it, the south, and an impermeable wall on all sides of it, that's a concern. And the flow is in that direction from west to east. And that is something I think you need to look at. Because I personally just don't think that you will actually have the 3 foot of separation when all things considered. I think you're going to find you have much less, and that there will not be an actual water quality improvement. And one other comment I do have as well is just the constructability of this property with a wall right along the northern property line. How is it that you construct this property and not impact the neighbor to the north? And your erosion sediment control plan shows a double line of silt fence. And I don't know how you construct a wall along the northern property line and have a double line of silt fence without going onto the neighbor's property to the north. That's something else I think that needs to be addressed in this plan.
Sure, I could address that. We put plenty of walls right on the property lines. Many walls exist today right along property lines. There's ways to construct. We haven't retained a structural engineer yet at this point, but you could do big block retaining walls, gravity walls that don't require much of a footing. So there are means and methods to constructing a wall right on a property line. We've done it many places. I'm sure you've seen them many places. So let's say we needed an inch or two off the property line, we can move an inch or two off the property line, but it's not feet off the property line in order to make sure we're on our own property and we're not putting anything on the neighbor's property.
And you still be able to put in your double line of silt fence?
Correct. We could put a roll of double line silt fence and start our wall. And then
And
once the
how-
wall's built,
How
our
wide
fence
apart
goes on
is the
top
double
of that
line of
wall.
silt fence?
And then the wall goes on top of that. one of the consultants actually said we don't need a silt fence along that property line because that's not the flow of the water. So, you know, we can.
Looking at this plan, to me, it does appear that there is flow that goes in that direction. At least looking at the existing grades that are shown on this plan, it does. So I do think it is something you would need.
Yeah, so we'll put silt fence, build the wall.
I understand.
The wall
but you
gets
have a
built,
double
the
line of
silt fence
silt
gets
fence.
moved to the top of the wall.
Okay, I think you need to illustrate that properly on the plan, and you're not doing it right now. You're just labeling double line of silt fence. And I still want you to address the mounding underneath this system, because I really think that's going to be an issue. And your own testimony has said that stormwater is probably the only, you said stormwater could be one of the impacts on this wetland system. And that's obviously something that needs to be addressed.
Sure. Let me correct that statement, though. What I said was that there is no stormwater improvements on adjacent properties surrounding this wetland. Thus, there has not been a huge impact on this wetland from directly discharging stormwater to this wetland. I said, if we directly discharge our property, we probably wouldn't have an impact anyways. But what I did say was our proposal does meet the town of Ridgefield. It does meet the 2004. It does meet part of the 2023 Connecticut Water Quality Manual. The Water Quality Manual specifically states when mounding calculations shall be addressed. We meet those requirements, hence why we didn't provide the mounding analysis. You're requesting something that isn't part of your regulation and isn't part of the Water Quality Manual guidelines. I understand your concern. We've added weep holes to the retaining wall to relieve the water behind the wall. So it's not really a bathtub. The water does migrate as it goes under the infiltration system and towards the retaining wall. It will leach through the weep holes and into the level spreader. So we're not really creating a bathtub. This is a slab on grade building. So there's no foundation along that edge. So there's not really a bathtub effect that I'm seeing. I don't, you know, that's what we follow. We follow the Water Quality Manual. Those are our guidelines. That's what we were tasked with. You're asking for something outside of those now. And you stated, you know, basically you don't care what the Water Quality Manual says. You want a mounting analysis.
The Water Quality Manual is a guideline. It is not a requirement.
Okay.
So, you know, you can go beyond what the Water Quality Manual says. And, you know, this to me is a very unique situation.
Okay.
If I may supplement your comments, Andy, and thank you so much, Mr. Pilch. You know, I think what Andy is saying is, you know, we are trying to respond, and I think not trying, we have responded to many rounds of comments from Artel Engineering, from folks in the community, from folks on this board as well. And really, at the end of the day, you know, all we can do is build to what the current guidelines and current regulations require. We can't build to a regulation that doesn't exist today or isn't found somewhere, and you know that's just not something that we can do. I think Andy, and I'm not going to do an impression of Andy's engineering expertise. You know, provided citations to the drainage manual, gave a very thorough explanation of why we think we've addressed that concern, Mr. Pilch. And you know, if there's, I think Andy, you know, if there's something else that we could provide, but it seems like we've ran through that quite thoroughly. So that's all I'd add to that comment.
Thank you all. Just in the interest of keeping this moving on, we got Tracy and Carson, and then I'd like to get the intervener representing the public involved. Going a little late, but I know some other board members want to continue. So let's start with Tracy and then to Carson, and then hopefully we can move on at this point.
I guess my question pertains to the mounding. I believe Mr. Trinkus was worried about the mounding is actually occurring on existing fill, and he was quite concerned about the condition of the fill as not being appropriate for what you're proposing. And I haven't really heard you address that question yet. And That certainly is a very concerning question to me.
Sure. I think we're addressing your third-party reviewers' comments more thoroughly, I would say, than some of the neighbors' comments. But if it's a concern of yours, I'm happy to address it. So the comment was the material that currently exists below the infiltration system. And his biggest concern was that it won't infiltrate. We did a percolation test, and that material will not infiltrate. A percolation test is not a proven method in his mind of what's required to, to do basically permeability testing. So we did a double ring infiltrometer testing, which is further testing, more specific testing, basically that doesn't allow water to seep out the sides. It's basically a container, a circular container that doesn't allow water to seep horizontally and just vertically. So we did those tests. We did 3 of those tests, and we proved that this material does infiltrate.
And was that the test that he requested?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you both. Carson?
So because I'm a nice guy, I'm going to give Mr. Klein an opportunity to amend his comments a little bit. I understand some of the frustration, and we've seen this from a lot of larger engineering firms that have done work across Connecticut. I have to agree with Mr. Pilch that the water quality manual or any other guidance material or advice or reports that we have on this are informative. It's the body of evidence for this case, right? The water quality manual itself is usually, it's a good starting point. The zoning regulations in town that dictate certain drainage requirements for the purposes of zoning are certainly a starting point. If all you had to do to meet the requirements of the inland wetland regulations was to meet those requirements, then this board wouldn't be required, right? I mean, you just have to have someone stamp those and say, yep, works with the water quality guidelines, you're good. We're trying to make sure on a case-by-case basis, taking into fact all the evidence, including how well or not well you're complying with different water quality guidelines for this particular site and this particular project, is more needed. Meeting the guidelines, is that fine, right? That's my understanding of our role and how the inland wetland regulations in Ridgefield are to be carried out. So when Mr. Pilch asks for, based on his experience and his deep knowledge of the subject, some extra calculations and some attention paid to mounding or other issues. Yeah, I mean, you can certainly not give that, right? I would suggest, again, as a friendly guy, that it's something that you would probably try to address because it doesn't stop with the 2004 water manual or the 2023 proposed or different provisions or the zoning regulations, right? Because we're here to try to analyze the whole body of evidence to figure out what's going to affect this wetland or what's not going to affect this wetland and balance that with proposed development. So I think Mr. Klein would probably agree with that. Yes.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with what I don't know that you and I are saying. I think we're saying the same thing, perhaps different ways. If there's another type of test, that's out there. But as Andy mentioned, we've looked at this several, different ways. And I think the Connecticut courts have provided several decisions that say, local land use boards, including wetland boards, review applications based on their existing regulations, the regulations that are in effect at the time an application is filed. So we think we comply with those regulations, and we certainly understand, our role is to make an application that meets those standards that are in your regulations today. And then the role of the Wetlands Board is, of course, to be the final arbiter of whether that is the case or not. So 100% agree with you.
Okay, yeah, almost, at least I think. It's just curious. So what guidelines in the inland wetland regulations for Ridgefield are you talking about complying with specifically?
Section 10.2 of the regulations, those 7 standards that guide a wetland board's analysis.
Okay, the general standards. I was just trying to make sure, because some people get confused and refer to the zoning regulations, which obviously are land use related. Okay. 2
different things, certainly.
Yeah, great.
Two
We're on the same page.
things. Cool.
Great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Great, thank you all. I think at this time, I think everyone's out of questions. Is your hand down, Tracy? Okay, there we go. Okay, so I'd like to move on to the neighborhoods. We have received intervenor status from on behalf of the neighborhood. I'd like to ask Mr. Trinkus. I don't see the list here. We add those professionals, Artie, representing the neighborhood. I don't know who's.
I'm adding.
I just added Steve Trinkus.
Okay, great, thank you. Is there, is Steve the only one?
Yeah, I'm, thank you. Steve Trinkus, I'm a licensed professional engineer with an office in Southbury, and I've done multiple reviews of this project for the intervening neighbors. A couple comments based on testimony tonight. Permeable pavement is not a viable option on this site because the underlying soils are not well-drained soils. They're a hard pan-based soil, and the guidelines that we've talked about at length tonight say it has to be located in A or B soil, which are deep, well-drained soils or sand and gravel. It would not be an appropriate option, in my professional opinion, especially as I do a lot of LID, throughout the area, and it's just not a good option for this site. My concern with the infiltration tests, and yes, they have done double ring tests, but they only ran the test for one 15-minute cycle. Similar to a perk test, you should run it several times to make sure you're getting a standardized rate. And it likely would slow down more than what they're doing here. But the concern I have with where the system is located is the one test pit, and I think it was test pit 1, it showed a layer of fill material that had ash and slag in it, and likely an unconsolidated material because both of those are not native soils. The concern is if you're infiltrating water into that layer, you may be picking up pollutants from the ash and slag that is then going to get into your shallow groundwater and migrate to the wetlands. We heard the applicant tonight say that we're not going to dig out the fill there. They do have a note on the plan showing that they're going to remove the topsoil and place select fill where the topsoil layer was, but they're not removing those underlying soils. Artel did suggest doing test pits, prior to construction. I disagree with that. You need to do test pits before decisions are rendered so that the design will actually function in the field. You cannot guess later on in life whether something's going to function. Regarding the weep holes, and this is all in the August 17th letter, these weep holes are 5 feet roughly below existing grade or roughly 10 feet below finished grade. The level spreader trench is at elevation 200. The weep holes are roughly at 195, give or take a little bit based on the cross section. So the water can go into the stone trench on the downhill side of the retaining wall, but in order for it to come out of the level spreader, is going to have to saturate the soil to a depth greater than elevation 200, because you have to have a hydraulic head to push the water down and back up the other side. So these weep holes aren't going to drain the area underneath it. And Alan Pilch makes a valid point with the groundwater mounding analysis. In well-drained soils, it generally is not necessary to do that. But in a soil like this, it very much is a reasonable thing. Regarding the manuals, the current one and the draft one, they are guidance documents to supplement engineers' professional judgment. But the bottom line is a professional engineer in Connecticut has the obligation in designing projects to protect the public health, safety, welfare. And if you have to go beyond the manual, that is not only your prerogative, that is your right to do so, because you have to make sure that you are addressing that standard. That's the higher standard we all operate under, not a particular project or anything else. Again, with the retaining wall, I agree with Alan that, there are many types of walls, but the double row of silt fence per the Ridgefield standards is separated 3 foot center to center. So even if you put one line of silt fence down, the face of the wall is 3 feet plus back from the property line. That's what's not shown on the plan. It's shown pretty much on the property line. The plan has now been revised to put in what they call an isolator row from Caltech, which is basically the first row of Caltech units simply being wrapped in filter fabric. I could find in a literature review no independent testing of the isolator row as far as pollutant removal, but I would leave this with you. If you have a layer of filter fabric, on top of gravel, and stormwater comes into it, maybe it slows down and some sand is deposited on top of the filter fabric. When the next storm event comes through, that sand is readily available to simply be resuspended because it's sitting on pretty much a smooth surface, being the filter fabric. So the claims of removal efficiencies from the isolator row are just simply based on lab results by contact, and are not independently done by anybody else as far as that goes. Deep sump catch basins with hooded outlets only have a removal efficiency of suspended solids of 9% based on real world monitoring. While they can be used for pre-treatment, it's not a high reduction in total suspended solids. Again, with any application, the burden is on the applicant to prove that their project will not cause an adverse impact. What we do not hear, and I've harped about it, since day one, is a pollutant loading analysis, which calculates the pollutant loads that will be developed by this site, and by detailed calculations using some standard equations, show how well the treatment system will reduce those loads prior to the water going into the wetlands. You do not have that. Again, I think it's questionable whether the infiltration system is going to work as intended because of the variable soils. When I dug test pits on the adjacent properties, pretty much north and south of the original system location that was perpendicular to the sidelines, particularly on the downhill end, was hard pan fill, original topsoil, and more hard pan. Not a very good soil for infiltration at all. And down, I think, 20 inches or so, I was hitting wet soils. So the concern of not having a 3-foot separation is very valid. But as far as some of the claims that, the town's dumping all this water into here, and we're doing this, yes, many towns have done exactly this. Everything was discharged, both this water course and the one that's located between High Ridge and Main Street. Yeah, all the runoff from all those developments goes into it. That's what was done years ago. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't raise the bar and really improve the water quality going forward. I do disagree with the applicant. I believe as this stream system does go back into a town system under Gilbert Street, it is still part of the drainage system. Truly, disconnected impervious cover is that it infiltrates fully into the ground, and there is no discharge to any other system. So I believe this is an increase of impervious cover within the MS4 of the town of Ridgefield. But the bottom line is, it has not been proven, in my professional opinion, that you're not going to have reduction in pollutant loads, particularly metals and hydrocarbons. You have a big parking lot here. Those compounds can be toxic to aquatic species within the bottom of the wetland systems at very low concentrations. And we have no evidence that those will be reduced. And again, I'm not going to go through other things. You have my August 17th letter. So I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trinkus. Any questions or comments from the board at this time? Being none, I do want to move to the public, and also I see Mr. Verbicus on the line as well. So
I think Carson has his hand up.
Just to keep things moving, I do want to. Carson, thank you, Mr. Trinkus. Carson.
Steve wants to talk to me so badly, he had to point that out.
Well, I saw your hand up.
I appreciate that, Mr. Trinkus. Just a question for the record. I am an engineer, perpetual engineer in training, not a licensed professional engineer, but so I do have some knowledge in this area. But for the record, the pollutant load, the metals, the hydrocarbons, things like that, what would be a standard or typical way to reduce those or treat that issue?
Well, metals and hydrocarbons tend to have a high affinity for attachment to fine sediment particles like silt and clay particles. Coarse sand, they don't attach to, but they attach to finer particles. So if you are clearly trapping the suspended particles, which are your silt and clays, you can generally get the metals and hydrocarbons. There are practices out there, both LID, low impact development, or LID, or structural practices that could be used that could give you those removal efficiencies, but it's not actually my position as an engineer working for the interveners to design a project for the applicant. I point out what is not correct, and they're a longtime engineering firm. They should be able to figure out a solution, but you really have to trap the fine silts and clays to get rid of the metals. Because of how they attach.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other board members at this time? Questions, comments? Seeing no hands, I would like to ask Caleb and Artie if we can open it up to the public for comment. I just want to point out that anyone wishing to speak from the public, I'd like to kind of contain the discussion to about 3 minutes per person, and make sure that it is a relevant wetlands or watercourse point, just so we're not dealing with traffic or anything like that. So if I could begin with any public comment out there.
I'm promoting Deborah right now. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Please, when you come into the discussion, please state your name and your address for the record.
Sorry. Hi. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Please
I'm sorry.
state your name and address for the record.
My name is Deborah Franceschini, and I live 72 Spireview Road in Rachel. I lowered my hand, so I'm sorry about that. I was just trying to identify who Mr. Conant was, because I thought I heard him say he was a different name. Thank you. That's all.
That's correct. There are three, or was three at one point, Conants, all related, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Klein, but related to land tech professionals, and all have stated their name correctly.
Yes.
Other than Mr. Khan.
Other than the real Dan,
the real Mr. Khan,
who's a colleague of mine at Carmody Law. So yes, sorry for the technical confusion.
Great. Does that answer your question? I can't see all of your last name, Miss Franish.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Franischetti. Great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Caleb. Seeing any other members from the public?
Yeah, I'll let Jacqueline talk now.
Thank you.
Hi, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Please
Hi.
state your name and address for the record.
Hi, good evening. It's David Sachs. I'm here with Jackie. I live on Abbott Avenue, and we were hoping that Steve Danzer, Dr. Danzer, could join us tonight. He's a soil scientist, but at the last minute he was unable to do that. So he asked that I read the letter that he wrote so that everybody have a chance to hear it. It'll take me a couple of minutes to do that, if that's okay. At the request of the Abbott Avenue Neighborhood Action Committee, I've reviewed the plans and related documents posted to date regarding 27 Abbott Avenue. I offer the following comments for consideration by the Inland Wetlands Board. 1, wetland watercourse quality. The wetland watercourse corridor in proximity to the proposed development is substantial in both size and quality. The 2.5 acre wooded corridor is roughly 1,300 feet in length, flowing northerly between Katuna Street and Gilbert Street. The wetland watercourse area is part of a larger wooded wildlife corridor that continues to the north past Gilbert Street. The wetland corridor is one of the headwaters of the Titticus River. The stream located within its center was flowing during my investigation. The wetlands watercourse corridor is not a degraded system. In addition to providing typical hydrologic functions such as flow conveyance, flood flow alteration, and groundwater discharge, the system provides ecological functions and values such as benthic habitat for bottom-dwelling organisms, which are essential components of the food chain and food for wildlife. Equally notably, the wetland resources provide habitat and refuge for wetland-dependent wildlife, such as reptiles and amphibians, as well as habitat and passage for smaller terrestrial wildlife. Of note is a chain link fence located parallel to the east side of the stream, which may impede the passage of larger wildlife to and from the developed properties to the east. However, the fence does not appear to physically deter smaller creatures who have the ability to pass through the links or under gaps in the fence bottom. I reviewed the photo of the salamander submitted to the record by Gene Konechny that was observed near the wetlands abutting 27 Abbott Avenue during October 2022. The photo appears to be of a blue-spotted salamander, A. laterali, a Connecticut listed species. It's difficult to discern whether it's a blue-spotted complex or a diploid species, but either way, both salamander types are listed species by the DEEP. The complex is listed as endangered, while the diploid is listed as of special concern. The fact that a salamander was even observed in the fall outside of its normative spring breeding season attests to the quality of the habitat, in my opinion. Finally, it should be noted that the wetland corridor is environmentally significant as it serves as one of the headwaters to the Titticus River. Headwaters are important resources to protect as they provide nutrients to downstream organisms, as well as providing sediment control. Headwaters are also important in maintaining basewater flow to the downstream watercourse and wetland system in times of drought. The Titticus River ultimately drains into the Titticus Reservoir, which is part of New York City's water supply system. Engineering comments by Steve Trinkus noted that the proposed stormwater system would not prevent the discharge of pollutants into the wetlands watercourse. Any pollutant loads generated by the development would not only detrimentally impact the wetlands adjacent to the site, but will also flow towards that drinking water reservoir. Increases in pollutant loads are toxic to aquatic and often to plant life, exacerbate eutrophication of open water areas, and lead to diminishment of oxygen levels. These are all adverse wetland impacts by definition. Proposed wetland buffer. The proposed wetland buffer ranges from 20 to 30 feet in width. Considering the quality of the adjacent wetland resources and the upland land available, it is my opinion that a larger buffer width, i.e. 75 to 100 feet, would be more appropriate for this project to prevent impact. Smaller buffers, such as the one proposed, may be appropriate in cases where space is limited due to the location of pre-existing structures and or when a proposed activity is minor, i.e. does not generate pollutants or leads to large increases in impervious cover. But in this case, the proposed activity is not minor. More importantly, there's an existing residence located far away from the wetlands, i.e. there's already a feasible and prudent alternative that allows economic use of the lot. It's implausible that a larger wetland buffer could not be designed for this project, as there is already 215 feet of rear lawn to work with if the applicant wishes to develop the lot more. A larger wetland buffer will increase physical protection of the wetlands and prevent impact to the wetland from stormwater pollutants. 3, proposed buffer plantings. The choice of buffer shrubs is not congruent.
Excuse me, Mr. Sachs, how much more of this letter is left?
This is the final
Okay.
paragraph, I promise.
Okay, thank you.
The choice of buffer shrubs is not congruent with site conditions. The shrubs listed as wetland plantings, but should be upland buffer plantings, are to be located high up on the existing lawn, well out of hydrologic influence of the wetland corridor. Furthermore, the planting layout on the plan is confusing with regard to what species are to be planted where. Additionally, the revision date of the plans may not be accurate, as it appears that the site plans have been revised and re-uploaded to the town website several times, lastly on 7/28/23, with no corresponding changes to the revision date. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. Respectfully submitted, Dr. Stephen Danzer, professional wetland scientist, soil scientist, arborist, PhD in renewable natural resource studies. Thank you.
Thank you both. Appreciate that. Caleb, can you confirm whether or not we have that document? Have we received?
It's
that,
on.
And we have that.
the
It's up. I
Okay.
uploaded it to the application.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just want to confirm that we have it for the record. Thank you very much. Any other public, their hands up?
I have some comments later, but I'm happy to. I know that Liz Zeman wanted to say something. She's an architect and lives on Abbott and was prepared to talk tonight.
Okay, is she with you or do you see her hand?
She's not here, and I have no
Raised,
way to
Caleb?
see who else is here.
She can speak now.
Oh, there she is.
Hi, here I
Okay,
am. I've
Great.
had my hand up.
Very good.
I don't know how to get the video on.
Please state your name and address for the
Okay.
record.
I don't know how to get my screen on if you guys want to tell me how to do that. Anyway, my name is Elizabeth Zeman. I live at 2 Abbott Avenue. I live here with my husband. We've been on the street since 1997 and we've raised 3 children on the street. I can confidently say that I've seen every single weather, traffic, and utility event possible in the neighborhood. And I will also say confidently that our neighborhood is not heavily urbanized, as is repeated often during the applicant's presentation. Most of the houses in the neighborhood are single family with a few exceptions. I'm a licensed practicing architect. My husband is a licensed practicing civil engineer. I've been practicing architecture in Ridgefield since 2002, and I've submitted dozens of applications through the building permit, zoning permit process. I have further questions about the technical content of the application. I'm a little confused about what information is submitted at what point in the application and why we're not seeing certain information right now. I propose that the application as submitted is incomplete and as per section 8.2 of the IWB regulation should be denied. Additionally, the applicant's team has failed to show that no feasible or prudent alternatives exist. In fact, I think they have shown in their applications that there are feasible and prudent alternatives. I feel that the application lacks detail and specificity. The building and site plan are completely absent of any dimensions or architectural information. And why does this matter? The core of the applicant's application rests on the discussion of whether the proposed design adequately treats and handles stormwater runoff, accumulated snow melt, and pollutant loads, and whether there is adverse environmental effect. We must have an accurate calculation of the lot coverage and impervious surfaces. Historically, lot coverage is a percentage regulated by zoning, but in fact, its real purpose is to measure stormwater runoff. So therefore, we have to have an accurate calculation of what that is for this site. Right now, since the application hasn't gone in front of zoning, to my understanding, there hasn't been any variance or exception made to the application to allow it any other kind of exception. So we have to assume that the application is going to come as a multifamily development. So when I look at this floor plan, I'm trying to understand how big everything is, right? I'm looking at the building plan and I can sort of infer based on the building code that certain spaces need to be certain sizes. But I feel that it's not really the purview of the neighborhood, the neighbors, or of the board to try to infer any of this information. I think that this should be contained in the application materials. Kind of the biggest thing I keep running into is, why are we approving an application which is going to fail when it goes in front of zoning, particularly when it comes to parking requirements? I mean, I know people say parking requirements fall under zoning, but really it's impacting the lot coverage and the impervious surfaces of the application. So our own zoning code for multifamily requires 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. And we just have a new recently approved inclusionary zoning, which reduces that by 25%. So bottom line, the required parking spaces for the lot would be 21 spaces, and there's only 15 right now. So when I start doing the math on this, right, each parking space is regulated. It's got to be 9 by 18, 162 square feet. 6 additional parking spaces is 972 square feet. Where is that coming from? I don't see where it exists on the site, and I don't see how it's going to be accommodated in the future. There's no place to add paved area on the site. We could, I mean, it could be argued, okay, we'll reduce the footprint of the building, but you can't reduce the building size much further than it already is, because you need certain minimum dimensions, because there's a parking garage on the first floor and staircases are regulated by building code, and certain other clearances and spaces are regulated by the building code. So the only other thing is,
please look at wrapping this up, Ms. Zeman, just
Yep,
trying to control.
just trying to go through all my details. So there is allowances for putting parking off site, but that has to be within 300 feet of the site, and I don't think that's an option here. So to me, the fourth and the only viable method is by reducing the number of dwelling units. Therefore, the applicant must reduce the number of housing units. It's the only way to make the application feasible and prudent. And from a legal standpoint, I'm confused about why we are approving an application to move forward where it would not be acceptable under our zoning code. And I ask that the board deny the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see another hand, Jan Hebert. Jan?
All set to talk.
Hi, thank you very much for taking this. My name is Jan Hebert, and I live at 58 Prospect Street. I'm a commissioner for the Ridgefield Housing Authority. So my concern is something just a little bit more pragmatic. My husband is currently a selectman, and he has informed me that the issue with the flooding, that has to do with the fire department, Katuna, going all the way to Gilbert Street, et cetera, is really right now just in a study phase where they're trying to figure out exactly what's going on. I personally have 2 friends that live in that area that have experienced significant floods because of this issue. And I just want to ask the board to consider not approving this application until after that has been resolved, because I can imagine the impact of 14 more units in this area. And my concern is not so much for, I feel horrible for the people of Abbott Avenue to have to look at 14 units on that very narrow street that is in somewhat questionable condition, and having to have the impact of 14 more cars driving down that street. But as far as the wetlands piece is concerned, I'm more concerned about what is going to happen with this flooding situation with the town, and how it's going to impact our property at Ballard Green. And so adding more density to that just seems like something we shouldn't be even considering at this point until that piece of that has been remedied. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hebert. Caleb, are you seeing any more? I know we heard from Mr. Sachs and Ms. Rosto.
Zoom right now, but I'm done.
Don't see any other hands.
Unless David or Jacqueline wanted to say anything else. I see Laura Castellucci. I'll allow her.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please state your name
Yes,
and address for the
sure.
record, please.
Sure. My name is Laura Castelluccio. I live directly across from 27 Abbott. I live at 32 Abbott Avenue for the last 24 years. And I just wanted to comment, and I've mentioned before that there is the question of snow removal, and I don't remember how it's going to be addressed, but I literally live right across the street from the house to the right of it. And, well, looking at it, which has a house in the front and 3 in the back. And I can tell you where the snow goes. The snow goes absolutely on my lawn. And I don't even see where the snow can go with this new property that this proposal that you have. So I'm not sure if it's in the notes somewhere. I don't know if it's been addressed, but I can tell you there's no room for snow removal. And if your option is just taking it and plopping it across the street, I already have enough on my lawn, and so much is pulled up in that. There's so much of the ground that's pulled up from that coming onto the street. So I was a little concerned about that. And also talking about the wildlife, which I know it was saying it's not necessarily part of this discussion other than the wetland part, but I see constantly deer. We have a town coyote, we have turkeys, we have so much wildlife around. And I until today, I wasn't sure, or I hadn't heard about this 5-foot wall, which again, will block the wildlife from exiting the only part of Abbott Avenue that is where they shelter. So those are just my 2 points there as a resident that lives directly across, and I have direct experience with what I've just described.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Appreciate it. Seeing any other hands from the public?
David Sachs for now, if you had anything else to say.
Mr. Sachs, is your hand up for something new? Or
Yes,
is that okay? Please proceed. Name and address for the record again, please.
David Sachs, and I live on Abbott Avenue. And I want to say, we believe that the evidence produced in this hearing has established that the proposed activity, even as revised, satisfies statute 22A-19 in that it, quote, is reasonably likely to have the effect of unreasonably polluting, impairing, or destroying the public trust in the air, water, or other natural resources of the state. Laura, you got to turn down your mic. Once the board finds this impairment of our resources is reasonably likely, then statute 22A-19 states, quote, no conduct shall be authorized or approved which does or is reasonably likely to have such effect, as long as, considering all relevant surrounding circumstances and factors, there's a feasible and prudent alternative consistent with the reasonable requirements of the public health, safety, and welfare. We continue to believe that there are such alternatives. We understand that the applicant has the last word on the application, but we believe that the intervening parties should have the last word on the intervention. We ask that the applicant not be allowed to provide any more revisions or new evidence on rebuttal, as that would unfairly prevent the public, the intervening parties, and the board from having an adequate opportunity to read and review and reply accordingly. We thank you for your time, consideration, and service to our town.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. Last call, any other members of the public on this meeting? Please raise your virtual hand. See.
Oh, you've got to say something.
Okay.
Hold on.
I see Ms. Carvalho, or did.
These for a later application.
Oh, okay. All right, so any further members from the public for 27 Abbott Avenue?
Raise your hand.
Yeah.
Being none.
There,
No,
there is one.
Okay, please proceed quickly.
Barbara?
Hi, we're all together here.
Okay, please state your name and address for the record.
Okay, My name is Barbara Bollier, and I am presenting a letter by Marie McPherson, who was medically treated and is unable to attend.
Please state your address.
I'm trying to. I live at 25 Gilbert Street in Ridgefield, which is the residence of the Ballard Green Senior Housing.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go this route first. Dear Madam Chairperson and dear Chairman, I write to you, this is, remember, Marie McPherson presents this letter. I write to you on behalf of myself and 78 residents of Ballard Green Senior and Disabled Housing. Our homes include the wetlands in discussion. We respectfully ask you to make a stand to prevent the development of 14-unit apartments built on 27 Abbott Avenue from becoming a reality. Much of what I am going to say to you as the Inland Wetland Board, you will already be aware of. But for the record, a few considerations. Wetlands provide habitat to unique plants, a myriad of wildlife and communities, and our human encroachment. Wetlands are unique communities that can be destroyed in a matter of days, but require hundreds, if not thousands of years to form naturally. If this project goes ahead, the resulting pollution will cause serious threats to the ecosystem of our wetland at the Ballard Green. The wetland may be small, but it is connected to other waterways processing drinking water to New York City through the Titicaca Reservoir in New York State. Historically, across the land, we have suffered major acreage losses to human development. Some have been degraded by excessive deposits of nutrients and sediments from construction and surface runoffs. I understand that nationally we are losing 1 acre a minute of wetlands. Wetlands are habitats and enclaves of a myriad of wildlife, be it salamander, the amphibian that controls the mosquitoes in the area, mammals, the snakes, and the amazing diversity that exists. Wetlands are necessary for us now to prevent further extinction to wildlife and to preserve our future generations. I have a list that has been observed here because we have a great variety of wildlife that comes up from the wetlands. There's the European mantis, the red-tailed hawk, the red-winged hawk, owls, osprey, vultures, woodchucks, honeybees and bees, hummingbirds, goldfinches, beavers, skunks, opossums, bats, groundhogs, eastern gray squirrel, rabbits, hares, raccoons, coyotes, and once even a bobcat. Oh, and the blue spotted salamander is a fact here. We also have a yellow striped salamander plus a pileated woodpecker and downy woodpecker. I'm not going to continue on, but you get my drift. This is important, and it's important to the quality of life and to our future generations. Wetlands are habitats and enclaves of a myriad of wildlife, be it salamander, amphibian. Wetlands are necessary for us now to prevent further extinction of wildlife and to preserve our future generations. Once builders enter the picture, the wetlands are threatened, the safety and healthy environment necessary for the wildlife is destroyed. The very same can be said for the 78 human species who are currently living on Ballard Green. Some of us are disabled, and the noise of construction for 18 months will overwhelm people who currently do not drive. And what they're trying to do is they walk to the Prospector, which is about a block, and they work there, and they're productive adults. I ask that you please consider this.
Great, thank you.
I'm not finished, but if you want me to stop, I will.
I don't want to cut you short, but if you could kind of wrap it up.
Why is
I'm just trying to control, so we have enough time here.
Right, but why doesn't the public get enough time to speak? We don't we seem to be cut off at every meeting.
Well, I'm trying to keep it even and limit it to 3 to 5 minutes per person.
Yeah, no, they have at least an hour, an hour.
I understand.
By yourself.
It's okay.
You're back talking.
Please continue.
Back with me speaking. Wetlands are necessary for us now to prevent further extinction of wildlife and to preserve our future generations. Once builders enter the picture, the wetlands are threatened. The safety and healthy environment of necessary for the wildlife is destroyed. The very same can be said for us 78 humans. Sorry, I'm repeating myself. At the present, we residents, the young and old, live in peace and serenity, surrounded by beautiful trees and some over a century old, some of them over 200 years old, and gardens. Some of us are bird watchers, members of the Audubon Society, and we noted the birds living among the wetlands, visiting our bird feeders. Some of us sit outside in the dark on an evening, and we watch the wildlife pass us by, be it foxes or skunk or raccoons. The wild animals add equality of life, which we understand is unique, living as we do in the center of Ridgefield. The wetland depends on us as a people and on the Inland Wetlands Board. We must speak out and we must save the unique and precious wetlands at Ballard Green. The proposed 18 months of construction schedule, which I'm quite sure will last beyond 2025, and it will pollute the wetlands. There will be the tremendous noise of construction and of machinery, and on a daily basis, pollution will fly through the air. Some of the people here have respiratory issues. There will be runoff, and all of this will endanger the waterways and the wetlands survival and the 78 older residents at Ballard Green Senior and Disabled Homes with their variety of health issues to endure this invasion into the tranquility, peace, and safety we enjoy now. This is a heartfelt plea of begging on behalf of future generations and the health of our residents and the survival of wonderful biodiversity of Ballard Green Apartments. Please stop the building of 14 units at 27 Abbott Avenue. Thank you for listening to our pleas. Sincerely, directed by Marie McPherson. Thank you.
Thank you. Has that letter been submitted to the department? Do we have that, Caleb?
Not yet. Well, I hope I'll be able to. It would be tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, if we could please have that for the record.
Thank you.
You could coordinate with Caleb at the town hall annex to if you have to hand deliver that, or that'd be great.
We have handled other things, and I will have to see that this is dropped off tomorrow.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Seeing another hand, Mr. Carr.
He's all set.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, please name and address for the record.
Kirk Carr, 62 Prospect Ridge. First, I'd like to thank the board. Clearly, you give these things a great deal of thought, and you bring a certain level of expertise that I think we all count on. So I've really been impressed by what I've seen during these hearings, though I was somewhat disappointed that the public was not permitted to speak at the last so-called public hearing. I'd also like to comment on Mr. Klein made some comments. Maybe he didn't mean to imply this, but it struck me that he was suggesting that Mr. Trinkus, because he was hired by the neighbors, was somehow, less, I don't know, is biased in some way. And clearly he and Land Tech have also been hired. So I think those kinds of comments were inappropriate at the time, and I think Mr. Trinkhouse is clearly highly qualified. And what he has said, even if it didn't repeat everything that the experts said that you had hired, he said different things, that he added value with those comments. And I trust you agree with that. I would urge you, I mean, this has caused a lot of concern, a lot of agita on the part of people in the neighborhood and people in Ridgefield beyond the neighborhood because of the incredible, I would say, egregious density. 14 units on 0.47 acres is the equivalent of 30 units per acre, is way over any kind of reasonable amount of development in this area. And for all the reasons that you've heard and that many of you have said, I think you should deny this, and I think it will be easily upheld if appealed in court. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Going back to the attendees, any other hands that have not yet spoke?
I think
Does
that was
relate to
everyone.
wetlands?
I think that was everyone.
That was everyone? Okay, thank you all from the public. Your comments are noted on the record. I did want to circle back. I do see Mr. Verbickas with us tonight. I wanted to include him in the discussion for any of his comments as they relate to this application. If he would like to join us. Mr. Verbickas.
Yes, sorry about that. I
there he is.
couldn't click on the unmute. Let me start the video as well.
Just wanted to bring you
the-
back and include
boy.
you. Yeah, I got some glare there, but
Yeah, sitting in the dark. Good evening. For the record, Dinas Verbickas, professional engineer. I've been hired by the town as a peer reviewer, and I've been listening to all the testimony, both by the applicant and the interveners and the neighbors and so on. And what we tried to do with our review was stick primarily to the engineering element and the design of the site itself. There were comments and concerns about mounding of stormwater in the or behind the retaining walls. I too had that concern some time ago, and since that concern was voiced, the applicant has added weep holes to the proposed retaining wall to act as a relief to whatever water might be mounding or traveling through the soils. And I suspect that those weep holes, what they allow to happen is for the groundwater to weep through subsurfacely and continue onward subsurfacely through the soils and toward the wetland to the degree that the water is able to migrate underground. Excuse me. I wanted to point out also that in most of the test holes, it does appear that likely the the original soils that were on his property were not likely the best for infiltration purposes, but based on the fill materials that are there and the percolation rates attained in those fill materials, for the most part, the water will, will percolate in. Whether or not the double ring infiltrometer tests should be run for a longer time, it could be. It appears, based on my review of the calculations, that the slowest infiltration rate was 1 the water dropping 1 inch in an interval of 15 minutes and projected over an hour, that would indicate a 4-inch drop in an hour. And the design notes that the infiltration rate utilized was 2 inches per hour. So it's, in a sense, a factor of safety of 2. So I think that the way that the calculations were prepared, the numbers work. It also indicates that there will be decreases in rates of runoff for all storm events that were analyzed. Though I did note that there was a little oddity in the 100-year storm, but I'm not sure that it needs to be researched further. In that the elevation attained by the stormwater during a 100-year storm would, based on the calculations, stay within the system itself, within the stormwater management system. Other comments that I had, the applicant had gone through them. I had suggested that perhaps the stormwater drain pipes be laid out in a manner in which the bends in the pipes are eliminated. Bends in pipes are usually where things get hung up and clogging can occur. And the applicant stated that they could, in fact, straighten out those pipes, and I'd suggested not only the pipe to the west or the catch basins and roof drains and so on the west side be straightened out, but also the catch basin and piping on the east side. Perhaps that catch basin can be pushed a little bit further from the retaining wall and lined up in a east-west fashion with the isolator row in the stormwater management system. The isolator row in the stormwater management system, it's not something that I'm a fan of, but as the applicant has not proposed any other form aside from deep sump catch basins to separate out sand, sediment, and debris, the next best thing would be, short of a swirl concentrator, the next best thing is one of these isolator rows. With the isolator row, basically it isolates the stormwater flows that come initially from the catch basins to one portion of the stormwater management system, and in doing so it captures all the sediment and debris and sands or anything else that washes through the system within this one row of the infiltration system, and that can be accessed and cleaned out, although I haven't seen it done. The manufacturer says that it can be done, but anyways, in effect, the sands and sediments do get separated out within that row of the stormwater management system. And I guess because the petroleum products and or metals bind to the finer sands and such, the system does provide, I believe, some removal of those elements from the stormwater management system. The system as it's proposed is also set to be installed at or above grade. Just a little bit of the system in the southwest corner will be tucked in ever so slightly into existing grade, but the remainder of the system will be placed on top of stone, which will be placed on top of grade. So effectively, the system will be raised up a little bit further from indications of models or groundwater that were noted in the test holes. And we did suggest that the applicant conduct additional soil tests just to confirm that the soils in the area of the detention system are consistent with the other test holes that were conducted. Likely they are, but we won't know until the test holes are conducted. So that was one of our other recommendations. I do acknowledge that some of the comments that other people had made pertaining to zoning requirements and such. There do appear to be issues. However, this is not my task to review at this point. Zoning related elements, I just tried to stick with the wetland elements and the design of the stormwater management system itself. Other points that people had made also regarding the retaining wall, it will be a challenge to construct it on the property line as proposed. And depending on the methods used and the style of wall, it'll be challenging to put in both the erosion controls and the wall as designed. And the applicant may find that they'll need to pull that wall a little bit off the property line to install it. However, the applicant did state that they can construct it on the property line, and I've seen walls on property lines as well, so I'd have to agree that it can be constructed. And I suspect it can be constructed in a manner in which erosion and runoff would not be an issue, and that the wall itself would provide the barrier for erosion controls once that wall is up. And aside from that, we really don't have any other comments to share. Though again, we'll agree with others that it is a ambitious application. And though ambitious, there are no direct impacts to the wetlands, nor will there be a loss to the wetlands. So it's a challenging decision to make with respect to the development of the property. But I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have. And I'm here.
Thank you, Mr. Rebekis. Thank you. I'll open it quickly up to the board members. I think we're really pushing the time for a much needed break, I think, just to stand up and stretch, but I'll open it up to the board to make any questions or comments, if there are any. Tracy?
Yeah, sorry. So Mr. Rodriguez, sorry, let me just look through my notes here. I guess you did sort of mention that the single row of sediment trapping wasn't your favorite option. So what would you recommend in its place?
Yeah, so the isolator row, I generally don't like it in that it is challenging to clean out effectively should there be clean out required. And in some instances, I think originally the thought was, well, it's an isolated row, and when it gets clogged up, it gets removed and replaced. And I don't think that has ever happened, but I think that was the original thought when these were initially proposed and brought to the market. What I generally like to see is some form of a swirl concentrator. It seems to do a decent job of removal of floatables and sands and sediments. And different products provide different removal efficiencies and so on. So the product would definitely have to be sized appropriately. But as I had stated at a previous hearing with the commission on a different application, we do, as a firm, often visit sites, condominium developments and commercial developments that have stormwater management systems consisting of deep sump catch basins and swirl concentrators and detention basins and systems and ponds. And we found that more often than not, the stormwater management or catch basins, they seem to hold on to most of the elements that we're fearful of being transported throughout the sites and onwards and out of the systems. So when we do look, again, mostly catch basins capture the heavier particles. The swirl concentrators seem to do a decent job, and in at least 3 sites that we look at with some relative frequency, once every couple of years, is no indication of any sort of silting or debris or anything that gets past these types of systems. And primarily we're looking at detention ponds or basins that have a small amount of water at the bottom, mostly overgrown with healthy growth at the bottom. No indication of any sediment or silt or anything washing through these systems. So I think that the practices that are available to the developers now are pretty darn good. And again, I choose a swirl concentrator type of product to help clarify the water prior to going to a subsurface stormwater management system. But again, that's an option that designers are often able to come to their own conclusions and choose what they prefer. I hope that answered. I'm sorry it took too long.
Well, that's okay. I have another second part of that question. I'm sorry to ask so many questions tonight, but Mr. Trinkus, and just for the record, the Inland Wetland Board, our code states that we can consider any testimony that we hear, and from outside consultants as well. So we take it all in, and if we're concerned about any of it, then that's pertinent. And it's important for the applicants to keep that in mind, that we're looking at all of the testimony. So Mr. Trinkus was concerned about the ash and the slag and the fill potentially leaching into the outflow. And he also was concerned about the metals and the hydrocarbons from the runoff leaching into the system and eventually into the wetlands. And so I wanted to ask you about these concerns.
Sure. So with respect to I'll use a 5-cent word, deleterious materials that are in some of the fill, or that were found in some of the deep test holes excavated. Those certainly should be considered for removal. In the years of practice the years that we've been practicing, as Artel, we've only had a couple of instances on a couple of older inner city, dare I call them inner city sites, where we encountered these types of materials, and from those sites, those materials were excavated and removed, and clean fill was brought in as a replacement. I don't know to what extent that slag or ash was found. It only came up in one of the test holes on the set of drawings, so perhaps it is limited to just that area. But you won't know until you go and actually excavate. Although I suspect where the double ring infiltrometer tests and the percolation tests were conducted, likely if that material existed, it would have also been encountered in those holes, as they are located fairly close to deep test hole 1 where that material was found.
Thank you. Tracy, anything else?
And no, well, in terms of questions, I guess, do we have comments can we comment at the end?
Yeah, I
Well,
just wanted to.
I do have one more question.
Okay.
I know, I'm sorry. So what happens with the issue of the parking spaces? So if it goes through our board and goes to planning, if they add more parking spaces, then did it come back to us again?
Is that to me?
Well, yeah.
Or
How
just
does
in
that
general? So
work? Yeah.
I suspect that this application is going to go through, as it does not meet any zoning criteria. It likely is going to be an affordable housing application, an 830G application, and with an 830G application, as I understand it, basically a developer is able to, for the most part, decide what is appropriate and what is adequate for the development, regardless of the zoning regulations, with only having to really keep in mind or be cognizant of health and safety matters with respect to the development. So whether there's sufficient parking or not, under such applications really does not become the purview of any review board, I don't believe.
Attorney Beecher, do you have a comment on that as well?
Well, I thought Attorney Verbicus was doing very well. So you've got an application in front of you, and so you have to react to the application that's in front of you. We can't predict what the Planning and Zoning Commission is going to do. Dinus suggested that it might be an 8-30G affordable housing application, in which case the applicant doesn't have to strictly adhere to each and every setback or other types of regulations that might apply to this particular property. So, that's the answer in a nutshell. You have to react to what you've got in front of you. If an application needs to be modified and therefore come back to you, then you'll react to that at that particular time. But in a nutshell, that's how it should work at the moment and how it might work down the road.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I see Mr. Attorney Klein's hand up just to chime in on this topic. Attorney Klein? I see his hand up and his mic off, but I do not see him. Might have lost him. Is he Attorney Klein is still there?
I'm texting him, so let's just I guess move forward. Yeah, I'll text him. I think he was having some issues.
I'd like to get us to a point of a break and so we could stand, get out of our chairs and stand. But before I do, is there anything else to wrap up tonight? I have, and Caleb can confirm, we would have to close the public hearing on September 14th. I believe our next scheduled regularly scheduled meeting is September 7th. Is that correct, Artie?
No, we have September 14th as our regularly scheduled meeting, and
Oh,
the
okay.
public hearing with 35, extensions
Good.
to be closed by September 16th. So that's why it has to be closed on our
Okay.
regular meeting, September 14th.
14th. Okay.
Right.
Good. And then, as I stated earlier, for the record, we have till October 19th, which is 35 days to render a decision.
After September
Or-
14th. Yes, if we close it on that.
After the 14th, after the public hearing closes. Okay, correct.
14th. Right.
Good, thank you. So.
I'm sorry, are you closing this meeting now?
No,
This,
nothing.
no. So if we have a few more things we want to say about this application, we can
Yeah,
still say.
do we, I'll get the board members feeling at this point at 9:40. Do we want to take a quick 5-minute break and come back to wrap this up? Any feelings? Can we tough it out till a few more minutes?
I'm flexible as long as I can say a couple more things at the end.
Okay, seeing no major objections to sore backs, I will say that we keep going and take a break after, before the next application. If everyone's okay with that, Tracy?
I guess just a few things that I wanted to say, and just still a little bit worried about some of the comments that Mr. Trinkus has made. And I will just say this again. In the last meeting, a couple of the board members said that we really wanted to see a prudent and feasible alternative that addressed designing something that was completely outside of a 100-foot buffer, given the density of this project. And now the addition of Mr. Danzer's concerns. I'm also concerned about the potential of the ash and the slag infiltrating into the outflow waters and the metals and hydrocarbons. I'm concerned about where the snow will go. So I still have quite a few concerns. And I'd also like to request that Mr. Danzer come back to the site and just see if there are any wood frogs in the area.
Thank you, Tracy. I will leave that up to the Publix team. And maybe Mr. Finkus could reach out to Mr. Danzer or the neighborhood group who's still on this call can share that information in your request. Do you have any other questions or comments? No? Do we have Mr. Klein back? His hand's still up.
Yeah, so he's with Dan.
Any luck?
Yeah, he's frozen on his, but
Okay.
he's with Dan.
Okay. Then at this point, do we need, just checking my notes here and the dates, do we need an extension from the applicant to proceed to the September 14th meeting?
Yes, we do.
Yes,
Is the applicant willing to grant the board that request?
Can you add Dan into, is there another Dan in the audience?
I just added him.
Okay.
Is he,
there he is.
there we go. Oh,
Folks, I'm so sorry about that.
There's Mr. Klein.
Yep, this is for the record, Jay Klein. Yeah. with Carmody Law. I just, to the extent it was helpful to the questions a couple of minutes ago, now at this point, both Attorney Beecher and Attorney Verbicus, I'll say, are correct in that when this goes before the Planning and Zoning Commission, it will be filed under the State Affordable Housing Appeals Statute. So we will address parking in accordance with that statute with your colleagues on the Planning and Zoning Commission. You know, I leave it to the board. I know the hour is late, but we are, you know, prepared to respond to the comments that were made in the context of the petition. And I'll keep it brief since we will be coming back, it sounds like. But I would echo, you know, comments made by Mr. Verbicus earlier. You know, the first prong of that statute says that a petitioner needs to show an unreasonable harm to the environment. And, you know, we heard Mr. Verbicus say there'll be no direct impact to the wetlands as a result of this project. And I think that really takes care of many of the comments that were raised, but we can provide technical responses in addition to what he has he stated just a moment ago. In terms of a feasible and prudent alternative, you know, I think the important thing and really the terrific thing about wetland regulation in Connecticut is that it encourages us to strike a balance, right? To find the proper balance between protecting the environment and allowing us to address other societal concerns through thoughtful and appropriate development. The term prudent is defined as reasonable in light of social benefits derived from a project. And here, there are certainly really significant societal benefits. Not just the environmental protections that Andy and Brian have discussed, not just the fact that we're avoiding impacts on the wetlands, but at the same time, we're able to address a housing crisis that's plaguing not just the town, not just the state, but really the entire country. We think our project has struck that balance really well, and modifications that would reduce the density of the project would, quite frankly, be imprudent, as it would provide unnecessary protections to a wetland resource that's already being protected under the proposal, while risking the ability for our team to deliver desperately needed housing. I think that's really important to keep in mind. However, because there's no case that there will be an unreasonable impact, you need not reach the question of whether or not there is a feasible and prudent alternative under the petition. We're prepared to walk through the factors contained in section 10.2 of your regulations tonight. I know Andy and Brian were prepared to provide some additional responses, but I defer to you, Mr. Chairman, if we're coming back on the 14th. I want to be mindful of your time. And of course, what I should have said at the beginning of these comments, appreciate our neighbors hanging in and attending this meeting this evening too.
Thank you, Councilor. If it's possible, I will.
I'm sorry.
Accept that. I'll
Sorry.
I'll defer to Tracy quickly with her question.
I apologize. We did have a case. Mr. Danzer did say that he was concerned that this application would harm the wetland. So that's the purpose for my request for prudent and feasible alternatives. So we did have that case, and I am concerned about that. So I am requesting that.
And I believe there are alternatives in the record. You know, there's an alternative with a mid-rise apartment building that is further away from the wetlands, perhaps, you know, but again, there is no, you know, we've heard from Andy, from Brian, and from Mr. Verbicus, you know, that we don't need to do that to adequately, to appropriately protect the wetlands.
Just for the record, as a member of the board, I'm requesting it based on the testimony that I heard. It is a request.
I think Brian did bring those up earlier tonight. We can bring them up again tonight or bring them up again on the 14th. That's whatever you prefer.
It's my request. for clarity.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Attorney Klein. Yes, I will take you up on your offer to defer further discussion at our next meeting, and would request on behalf of the board at this time the appropriate extension to do so.
Yeah, I'm nodding my head. I'm saying yes, and I'll punch up a letter tonight before I shove off here.
Great. Thanks so much. Thank you all for your time and discussion tonight. And we will see you at the at our next regularly scheduled meeting.
But
Go ahead, Andy.
I just think we need a little bit more direction before we, continue this hearing, especially from an engineering standpoint. You heard obviously from consultants, you've heard from your third-party peer reviewer, you've heard from the neighbors, consultants, and there still seems to be some concerns. So we really need to flush out, I think, those concerns right now. And if there needs to be plan changes, we need to do those before the 14th, because the 14th is the last day. So we'd like to hear from you folks, like, where are we? Where's this going? We've heard permeable pavement. Do we want that? Don't we? I'm hearing swirl chamber. We could certainly add these elements. But I just want to make sure we're all, there's some disagreements with your third-party reviewer, who I think has no dog in the race, right? So he's the most unbiased opinion out of everybody here, right? We're obviously promoting our client. The neighbors, consultants obviously are promoting for the neighbor, but you heard from an unbiased professional engineer who gave his opinion, pretty strong opinions, but I'm still hearing some disagreement. So I want to hear from you folks, what more would satisfy you guys to get to a positive outcome for us? That's where I'm at, because I still feel like there's some concerns. There's something with the trees and the canopy. I've heard a little bit from Tracy. Alan, I don't know if you still have some concerns with, you've heard from Verbicus on the mounding. He has no concerns. If you still have concerns and you want to see that, and then we didn't provide that for you, I want to make sure we hit all the technical aspects. We still strongly feel we meet all the stormwater quality regs and your own regs, but they're, as you guys mentioned, you could ask for more. So we want to hear what that more is. Like right now, I think is the best time, because we're going to run out of time. So
very good. Understood.
Yeah. Thank you.
We'll open that up to the board members to address Andy's comments or questions, seeking additional requests and clarification on what you're looking for or still questioning. I'll start with Carson.
Sure, I think that's an entirely reasonable and appropriate request. Yeah, so and I can only speak for myself personally, yeah, I appreciate the comment, but I really don't have a dog in the race either. I'm just being tasked with trying to make sure development and wetlands are balanced, and that's what I'm trying to do. There are folks being paid on both sides for different reasons, and they have different interests, and I'm trying to weigh all that. And we do have some interesting testimony. We've got some testimony from the applicant. We've got some testimony from our peer review. We've got, for the town, we've got some testimony from professionals from the local community. And there's some professionals on the board as well. And as one of those professionals, I'm trying to weigh all that and balance it. And I obviously have my own background and opinions on things with respect to best practices and whatnot. So for me personally, I think the development is just too close. The buffer, 25-foot, 30 buffer, I think is too close for two reasons. One, I think there's concerns with respecting the existing canopy, which I think is a significant attribute that should be preserved for the existing wetlands there. In one of our other hearings, undisturbed vegetative buffer, particularly large canopy trees. There's more evidence submitted in that case, obviously not in this record, but it's my opinion from having learned from that. That's a significant advantage that we should try to preserve for the current hydrology and to maintain that. So I think and again, I haven't seen the actual canopy lines or the construction limit lines on a map, so I don't know if they overlap. Based on my site visit and based on looking at the maps, it looks like they probably do. So I would presume that, you know, the retaining wall and the level spreader should probably be moved back further away from the wetlands, at least outside of the canopy. That's my main concern. The secondary concern, which I think is also of importance, and it does tie into Mr. Verbickus's statements, is about the treatment of the total suspended solids. I'm also concerned about dissolved solids, any sort of pollutants, right? And also viewing the proposed system with respect to the likelihood and the issues with respect to maintenance. So underground systems, at least during my career, have not been a preferred system for environmental concerns. Engineering wise, they work fine when they're designed correctly. I understand that. It's overland flow, low impact development procedures, which the new draft manual touts, specifically suggesting that low impact development procedures, including overland flow, be the predominant initial design choice, and that hardscaping or structured, subsurface drainage systems be a secondary design choice. And obviously you do need to collect the water, but I think as far as treatment goes, the natural, flow over vegetated surfaces, whether it's the existing lawn, which I understand is not the ideal wetland plant or wetland buffer plant, but it is a natural surface. So it's taking care during doing the natural processes of a lot of the pollutants that are in that drainage water. Whereas if you go through the system, if it infiltrates all the way, then you might be good. But in a storm event, like a 100-year storm event, where you're flushing it all out and it's going to be flying off that level spreader and going across 25 feet, I don't think the 25 feet is enough to treat that. So I'm looking at, my concerns are that everything is just too close, and it needs to be moved back further. And I understand that's not something that's directly palatable, because it's a small lot and that probably affects how many units are there, or at least how the units are configured, but that would be my concern.
Thank you, Carson. And in response to Andy's question, did you have any opinion on his inquiry on permeable pavement?
Only with respect to, and this has been batted around in a couple of the documents and in some of the testimony tonight. And I understand that the applicant has said that they would be happy to supply information on the fill specifications, but we haven't seen those yet. And they've been asked for a couple times in some of the other documents by the engineers. So if I think the fill specifications, whether it's existing fill or select fill that's brought in, if that works with the permeable pavement, and the engineers are kind of, or at least there seems to be a consensus or more preponderance of engineers thinking that that's a good design solution that can allow for some of these natural processes to take place, then that's a possibility for that. But would be concerned about the fill that's underneath that permeable paver to make that happen.
Great, thank you. Go to, I see Tracy's hand up.
Sorry, I actually forgot to lower my hand, but since you're calling on me, I guess I would agree with both Mr. Tricus and Mr. Verbickus that the existing soil underneath the treatment system should be completely replaced. So if there is ash and slag in that fill, then I don't think it would be appropriate to have water leaching through that and then going into the wetlands. And then I guess Mr. Verbickus also said something about the small concentrator as a better system than sort of the long single row to remove the sediment. So I think I would want to hear about that. And I'm sticking with Mr. Danzer's 75 to 100 foot buffer. I think the tree canopy, when we were there, just roughly looking at it, appeared to be 45 feet beyond the face of the shed. But again, we need to have that delineated, and that would bring you probably around 75 feet away from the edge of the wetland. So just I think we should, I'm sticking with Mr. Danzer's request for 75 to 100 foot buffer. In terms of the permeable pavers, I don't think we have enough information about the soil, and Mr. Trinkus was very concerned about that. And since he's an engineer and I'm not, I'm more inclined to stick with his guidance on that.
Thank you, Tracy. Just to be clear with the canopy, is your major concern with that thermal pollution to the water course or something else?
So thermal pollution, yes. It also absorbs rainwater, rainwater, and provides habitat.
Great. Thank you. Any other board members? Alan, do you have any opinion professionally on the pervious pavement?
I actually agree with Mr. Trinkhouse's comments that in these soils, it's probably not appropriate with regard to permeable pavements. I also just say that I would agree with what Tracy said regarding, at least a 75-foot buffer. And, from the wetland edge itself, I think would be most appropriate. And I still would prefer to see a design which does not create a bathtub. We don't have a retaining wall on the north side, retaining wall on the east side, and the buildings on the south side. I just think that's not a good situation, period. And that would negate the need to do some type of mounding, because now I would have much more confidence that any infiltration that's occurring at the chambers would not be contained by a wall. And telling me that it's got weep holes at the bottom of the wall, 5 feet below grade, does not give me confidence that's going to drain, period, not in these types of soils. So I would agree with what Tracy said in that regard. And also, I would also just point out, I understand their concern about that, but it's not our job to design it as members. It's their job to interpret what we say and then come up with a reasonable alternative.
Thank you. Any other board members wishing to speak? I see Mr. Phelps.
Good evening. My name's Chris Phelps, member of the IWB in Ridgefield. I'd say, I agree with Tracy and Mr. Pilch and Mr. Trinkus. However, my biggest concern is, or one of my biggest concerns is that when you have an increased density of human beings, you have an increased density of human beings making bad decisions, which land tech can't plan for. However, it's my experience of being a lifelong resident of Ridgefield that people, kids, dogs, cats, whatever, like to make cut throughs. And it's a great temptation to make a cut through from where the building's being proposed to go across through to the senior center and then into the CVS parking lot. And in doing so, there's all kinds of hazards that human beings can bring through the wetland in doing that. From your basic garbage to all kinds of things, vape cigarettes and all the other garbage that can be discarded on their way. So that is one of my biggest concerns, is that there's going to be a negative impact of the environment by an increased density of human beings in the area.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else from the board? Mr. Sumilidis, is that helpful to you and answer your question for additional information, or is there anything else you'd like to ask at this time?
This was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else have anything to say before we move on and end the session tonight and continue the public hearing to our next meeting on the 14th? Mr. Klein?
No, just again, wanted to confirm that the meeting on the 14th, guess that's a Thursday. I'm assuming September 14th at 7 PM via Zoom, correct?
That's
Yes.
correct.
Great. And I'll send you that extension letter right now, Caleb and Artie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time tonight.
Thank you.
This is Kirk Carr, on the record. Thank you for watching.